Good morning, Dan and Amy. To pro-impeachment Republicans like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Ben Sass. When you're standing at the edge of a cliff, moving forward is not necessarily the most judicious step. Might be something to consider, because this moment is about so much more than President Trump. And while you're running interference for Democrat socialists, you're not taking up the cause for Trump supporters who are being targeted by the left, are you? And let me give you an example of what I mean. Representative Ro Khanna from California on CNN yesterday.
Because the reality is there is still a large base of Donald Trump supporters in these constituencies who believe him. And we have to be candid about that this country is divided. And the question is, how are we going to have a peaceful transition of power and then convince a chunk of that base that it's time to heal this country?
Convince. Well, that's a euphemistic word, much more euphemistic than the language being used by more candid leftists like Eugene Robinson at the Washington Post.
There are millions of Americans, almost all white, almost all Republicans, who somehow need to be deprogrammed. It's as if they are members of a cult, the Trumpist cult, and who have to be deprogrammed. Do you have any idea how we start that process, even much less complete it?
Gene Robinson also had this characterization of Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz.
The difference between the White Citizens Councils and the Klan. Back in the days of Jim Crow, and the Klan was lower income. The White Citizens Councils were the Josh Hawleys and Ted Cruzes of their day.
The White Citizens Councils were the Josh Hawleys and Ted Cruzes of their day. The White Citizens Councils, you'll recall, were pro-segregationists, anti-Brown v. Board of Education, educational integration. And Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz are 21st century segregationists. How exactly? Because they objected to the electoral certification on January 6th?
And now you said a congressman wants to put them on the no-fly list?
Benny Thompson, chairman of the Homeland Security Committee in the House, suggesting that Cruz and Hawley could be or should be put on the no-fly list. Obviously, there's petitions circulating for them to be disbarred, which was mentioned yesterday. So, again, if you think this is all just about taking one final shot at President Trump, as Dan Henninger told us, using Trump to unite the Democrats and divide the Republicans for as long as possible, certainly that's one benefit for the left. But the real benefit, particularly with Republicans folding in to provide aid and comfort, is the cover it gives for the onslaught against rank-and-file Trump supporters throughout the land. And you think that's the way forward for the Republican Party. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Eddie Scarry. He is a commentary writer for WashingtonExaminer.com. He's also the author of the book Privileged Victims: How America's Culture Fascists Hijacked the Country and Elevated Its Worst People. Well, there's a timely book. Eddie, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Happy to be with you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And so what your assessment of sort of the topic we were tackling, which is this idea that Liz Cheney and some House and Senate Republicans have that impeaching and perhaps even convicting President Trump while he's on a golf course or at Mar-a-Lago is the way forward for the Republican Party?
Well, I think you said it perfectly. This isn't this doesn't end with another round of impeachment. They are using this, and I say they, I mean the left in general, which includes the media, but it's obviously the Democrats in Congress. They're using what happened last week, and they're going to use it for power grabs for probably the next 15 years, if not more than that. every little thing, every time a Republican opens their mouths, this is going to be what Democrats, they say, no, shut up, you started a riot on the Hill, you don't get to talk anymore. In fact, you should probably go ahead and resign. Anytime a Republican says anything about maybe we should make some adjustments to the next election to make sure that everything is a little bit more tidy. Nope, shut up. You started a riot over this exact same thing. Shut up, shut up, shut up. That's what this is about. And I think any Republican who thinks, okay, if we just do the impeachment and get rid of Trump, that our hands are clean, we can wipe our hands clean. No. Democrats, if you think running away from Trump, running away from his supporters is the way forward, fine, you can lose every election from here on out, because that's exactly what will happen. There is no way to wipe your hands clean of anything, and I don't think you have to wipe your hands clean of anything. Obviously, that's what happened last week was wrong. The people involved should be prosecuted. I do think that the president bears blame for a lot of it, but that is not to say that you distance yourself from ever having supported anything Trump ever did or said, the issues he raised, the problems that we have in our country that he confronted. Those are all things that you can still say, yeah, I don't like what happened last week. I completely disapprove of it, condemn it. And yet I still stand by everything I said right up until that point, and I don't apologize for any of it. That's the only way to do this. But for some reason, I think in their head, because Republicans always fall for this trap, they say, if we give Democrats what they want this one time, we can finally move forward and get along. No, that's not going to happen. It never happened before, and it won't happen now.
And I heard recently, from a friend, if you vote for President Trump, you will pay. So that even if you weren't there at the Capitol, you're going to be held accountable for the actions at the Capitol.
Oh, and I'm sure you guys get it probably if you see it on social media. I see it on Twitter all the time. It's people who, I accepted the reality a long time ago, and that's the nature of politics. You win sometimes, you lose sometimes. Hopefully you win the next one. Hopefully you do a better job of convincing people that you're right and they should join you. That's my attitude about politics. That's the nature of politics. But any mention of that, I get liberals on Twitter who say, no, everything you said about Trump, every positive thing you said, we're going to remember that. And I mean, it doesn't scare me, but I see the threat, and I know that for other normal people, the average person who doesn't have the luxury, and I consider it a luxury, I'm grateful for it, for my job to be paid to make arguments about politics and to constantly be fighting this fight and not be canceled because I have a good employer. That's something that a lot of other people don't have that same benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in the same position, and we make that point routinely. Another point, and this was brought up brilliantly by William Vagelli, because that's all he does is offer brilliance. A piece over at City Journal about whataboutism, and we've addressed this here, but I want to get your take. This is a very nuanced way of trying to eliminate any call of attention to the left's hypocrisy, to suggest that recalling the pronouncements that were made in the wake of the rioting that occurred last summer into the fall, into the present, actually, not being covered, but into the present with Antifa, is to engage in whataboutism, and you're trying to shift the standard or misdirect away from the issue at bar, which is what happened on January 6th. So turnabout is never fair play, and this is something where conservatives have to stand up and say as well. No, turnabout is not fair play if I said, because Jenny Durkin defended autonomous zones in the middle of her city, I would defend an autonomous zone in the middle of Chicago. I wouldn't. That would be turnabout not being fair play. Turnabout is fair play when you say, I condemned violence under the rubric of politics last summer in Seattle and Portland and Chicago and New York and Boston and so on and so forth. And now I'm condemning violence at the Capitol too. And I'm pointing out that you only seem to be distressed by political violence if it's coming from, at least in part, Trump supporters, not if it's coming from Black Lives Matter or Antifa, which you characterize as just an idea. That's not whataboutism. That's standard setting.
Right. I think whataboutism is really the dumbest term to have ever come up in politics within the last 5 years, other than other than the name Kamala. But I think a lot of conservatives have actually bought into that, because I'll run into that same.
Yes.
I'll talk with them, and they will say, well, now you're just engaging in whataboutism. It was usually something, if I spoke in favor of Trump or defended Trump on something, they said, well, no, and they were anti-Trump Republicans. Maybe they would say, well, that's whataboutism. Well, no, I'm sorry, I do get to point back at your own record. I do get to look at what other people did and said before they decided to take a particular stance. And I mean, the New York Times was calling it whataboutism too, because I obviously saw what happened last week. I said, that's wrong. And yet I'm watching MSNBC and CNN suddenly care that riots and mobs are not a good look for this country. They suddenly fell into that idea. They suddenly woke up to that concept. Meanwhile, all last summer, they had nothing but nice things to say about the Black Lives Matter rioting, the looting, the arson, the vandalism, the violence, the harassing random pedestrians, innocent people in the street. That happened for months and months. It continues to happen, and they say nothing about it other than, well, it's mostly peaceful. They otherwise have nothing but good things to say. But to point it out at all is, well, that's whataboutism. Well, okay, well, no, but what about it? Why can't I say, you know what? Why can't I say that was a problem for you? I'm saying it's a problem now, just like you were reading there. I say this is a problem, but you never had anything to say about that. So yeah, it's whataboutism, but that's not a problem. That's perfectly fair.
Well, it was a problem. 19 people died. We had 52 police officers. One lost vision in his left eye here in Chicago, injured. And BLM and Antifa, they didn't take down their social media platforms. They didn't put them on no-fly lists. And then candidate Biden, he didn't even address it until actually being forced, his feet to the fire to say something to denounce the violence. And it just is such hypocrisy.
Jerry, the mainstream of the Democratic Party, which I again say includes the media, the national media, the New York Times, Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, all of them, they truly believe that there is no equivalence between what happened for the months and months last year and the one day of what happened last week. They actually believe that last week Wednesday was a problem, that was real violence, and everything before, that was justified and inherently moral because it was in the name of fighting racial justice. They actually believe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the redefinition of terms, symbolic taking, looting, anything that was done is under the guise of reparations and so forth. That's right. Interesting piece in The Atlantic by Derek Thompson, not something we get to say very often, about how big tech impeached President Trump. And, one of the things in a purge is make sure you identify who is to blame before people decide that maybe you're to blame. And social media was getting some heat from the left for what they allowed to be communicated in advance of January 6th, as people were looking online at what was being communicated as the rioting was occurring on that day, saying Facebook and Twitter bear some responsibility. Well, no, this is all on the President of the United States. Pay no attention to us. You need to focus over here. And I wonder how much of the deplatforming of Trump in the hours right after the violence had occurred on January 6th gave cover for Democrats and encouragement for some weak-kneed Republicans to move forward with this impeachment gambit on the way out the door.
Oh, sure. I believe that, yes, the whole deplatforming, trying to completely isolate the president is, of course, and this is just yet one more step in that direction. But again, I think if any Republican in Congress believes that they can wipe their hands clean by going along with another impeachment, I'm going to tell you they're falling for the trap that they always do. Now, Democrats and the media will set the terms going forward for them. They will be sure to remind you know what. You were complicit in everything with Trump before. That's what they love to say. You were complicit, which simply means you followed the leader of your party. That's not new in party politics. But they will say that for the next, again, probably 10, 15 years. It's never going to go away. So the impeachment is worthless. I mean, I wrote just a couple days ago that I thought it was fine for Trump to go ahead and resign, ask Mike Pence for a preemptive pardon, and then go do something else. But if you're not going to do that, I don't see the point of an impeachment when you're going to have 2 days for a trial. I mean, and then a trial after he's out of office. It's just all a little bit ridiculous. I think people are going to wonder. The public voters are going to look at that and say, "He's gone. What are you doing?"
Yeah, and what about censuring him? Kevin McCarthy brought that up yesterday and thought that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be another way forward to say we don't, we as a full body bipartisan do not in Congress do not think this is appropriate. It would never be appropriate, and it would send a signal that it's a little bit too late for an impeachment to do a proper impeachment and trial. But it would be a warning to every future president that it could get to that level.
Eddie Scarry, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner, author of Privileged Victims, How America's Culture Fascists Hijacked the Country and Elevated Its Worst People. Thanks for joining us again, Eddie. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Is your kitchen needy?
Call Grumweedy.
Hi, it's Amy Jacobs.